I'm Jenny Gage, and this is Life Take 2. Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Thanks for being here. Today we're going to dive right into Ballerinafarm, Nara Smith, Mormon mommy influencers in general, and the broader topic of performance femininity, coupled with a new term that I've never heard before and I absolutely love it, which is social media literacy, which term I gleaned from a comment from one of you. I'm an almost 51-year-old grandma. I grew up without social media, the internet, or any of this stuff. So I'm learning things all the time that are totally new to me. So for those of you who've been asking how I'm feeling after my oral surgery, I can now open my mouth all the way and wiggle my jaw side to side, and the swelling is almost completely gone. I'm just icing the night, and I'm feeling better than I literally have in years. Thank you guys for caring. I feel very, very, very loved. I was terrified that I was going to end up with a dry socket like Kevin did after his wisdom teeth, but knock on all the wood, so far I've avoided that. So yesterday afternoon, I spent a couple of hours downloading a bunch of my videos from my TikTok page so that I can post them here. All of these are videos on the topic of Ballerinafarm, Hannah Nealman, the Nealman family in general, and Mormon mommy influencers. And I kind of feel like if I'm going to dump all of these Ballerinafarm videos, I need to give a little bit of explanation for the why. Because I hate when I post videos and then people are just like, oh, Jenny, you're just jealous. You want her life. Or, you know, you're bitter. Why can't you just move on and forget about the Mormon church and leave this sweet little family alone? I don't want all of that in my YouTube comment sections. The reason I'm so concerned about Ballerinafarm is that I was once a Mormon mommy, homesteading Tradwife influencer myself. I always say that like I was Ballerinafarm before Ballerinafarm was even a thing. I think that I was probably doing my homesteading influencer phase while she was still in like her homeschool middle school. We're talking before, obviously, there was TikTok. Instagram was a thing and Facebook was mostly my platform, but also we just built and paid for a giant website. And I had a national radio show, which today we would just call a podcast, but I live streamed it every Wednesday. So here's how that came to be. I was a Mormon stay-at-home mom, and then I started with an essential oil multi-level marketing company. I wanted to build a brand around my essential oils company and not just be like a salesperson. I realized the importance of having a whole lifestyle. Also, being a stay-at-home mom, I was always looking for ways to express my creativity, and I did want to influence people into what I felt was the ideal family situation. So I was really happy to put my family out there on our website, on my radio show, on my Facebook pages, so that people could say, hey, this is the way that everybody's supposed to be living. As a Mormon, I believed that Heavenly Father created the nuclear family with Adam and Eve, who then propagated and had all these kids running around on like the OG homestead. Honestly, like, isn't that what that biblical mythology is? It's the original homestead family. But it likely didn't exist, and my happy homesteading family also didn't exist. I'm going to give you just a couple of examples. When we moved to South Carolina with the intention of buying basically a set for ourselves, like I was so careful about every light fixture that we picked out and the color of the cabinets and the dishes and the aprons that I was buying, because I knew that I was going to be doing photography of everything. I was going to be posting recipe videos. I was going to be posting essential oils, concoctions, and things like that. So I bought a home on a homestead as a set. I knew that I was going to be living in that set. Things that I put out there under my Dear Mrs. Green, they were so lovely. They were just really, really beautiful. Just me sitting on my balcony overlooking this pristine piece of horse property, sipping my herbal tea with a little bit of lemon essential oil in it, in my organic clothing with a smile on my face, and everything looked absolutely idyllic. We had 4 children. Underneath our home, we had all of these 4-wheelers in this special built garage that they could ride around the pastures, and there were so many photos of us having bonfires under the trees and putting natural salves on wounds, and my brand was absolutely beautiful. right before we moved to South Carolina, I had just survived an ovarian tumor. I talk all the time about my near-death experience. I had an actual near-death experience, not just like, whew, that was a near-death experience. I had a near-death experience. I had been critically ill with a life-threatening, what should have been a terminal infectious disease for 3 years, and my health was absolutely terrible. So while I was posting videos of myself whipping up all these healthy concoctions, I myself was incapable of finding healing. Also, I was in the middle of the worst domestic violence that I would ever experience. Moving from my nice country club Mormon home in Mesa, Arizona to South Carolina put me in this isolated little bubble that was just the perfect environment for that abuse to like percolate and brew and eventually explode. But that did not keep me from putting my brand up all the time. Every Wednesday, I would do this little head to toe with Jenny and Joe on Blog Talk Radio. And I would talk about migraine relief and how we need to make sure that we're getting a broad spectrum of minerals because Americans are so like magnesium deficient. And I would be in bed up until the moment that I had to record that radio show. And after the radio show, I would barely make it through. I would go back to bed. It wasn't just posting pictures of my family doing natural organic things that we were doing already. I would think I need to do a couple of posts about whole grains. So I'm going to have to get out my whisper mill. I'm going to have to grind the wheat. I'm going to have to divide my sourdough so that I can stage this little photo session of myself making sourdough bread. And then, yeah, I'd force the kids into the kitchen. Hey, Chloe, can you get the bread knife and come slice this loaf of bread? And I was always shoving a camera in my kids' faces, making sure that they represented the brand. I don't have a degree in marketing or anything. I never went to school for any of the stuff that I was doing. But through experience, I learned two things. I learned that being sick didn't sell stuff. So I had to hide the fact that all my hair was falling out. I had to actually edit my photos so that you didn't see that I was jaundiced. I had to make my eyes look bright. I would put on sunless tanner, bleach my teeth, make sure that I looked healthy despite the fact that I was critically ill and would almost die during this time. And I knew that showing any type of like discontent in our family also didn't sell stuff. So if kids were arguing in the background or even like body language, if Jake looked mad or if I looked unhappy, people were concerned and they didn't come to me. I became in so many ways just a form of escapism for people from a life that like seemed oppressive. People didn't trust their doctors. They didn't trust pharmaceutical medications. Their health insurance was so expensive. So I come in with these natural remedies and I was helping them escape what's just a very confusing medical system. And as human beings, we all sometimes struggle in our relationships. Maybe you end up with a bad marriage or kids that have issues that can be really hard to deal with as a parent, or maybe you're a child who has parents that are hard to deal with. Our relational friction and stressors can be a constant source of pain and aggravation. And a lot of us turn to social media, TV shows, books, whatever it is to escape our own realities. And I found that people were using me as escapism. I have this really ridiculous blog, but you guys can go look at it if you want to. I'll put it in the description here. Don't judge. And I did all the stuff that Ballerinafarm did. Oh, look at us. We were city kids from the country club and we've moved to Arkansas. And I posted these Sunday afternoons in Arkansas and they look so beautiful. And I had people like all over Facebook that were just like, Jenny, your stuff just gives me hope. Like, I want to live that. And the really sad truth is that I also wanted to live that life and I wasn't. Sundays were actually my least favorite day. I had 3 hours of Mormon church where I was the primary president with major health problems. I felt like I could barely stand up. And I was standing there in primary for 2 hours deep in the country in Arkansas where I didn't have a lot of support or a lot of help. And the kids were just running crazy the whole entire time. And then Jake was usually at home on Sundays. He didn't like go off and go hunting or whatever. So that put me in home with Jake and my mother-in-law that we were living in. And just the whole entire experience was a nightmare. But Sundays were when it really escalated. And yet that didn't stop me from posting these beautiful little photos of my family on Sunday afternoons, living our best country life, off the grid, big smiles. Look at my beautiful husband. Look at my happy kids. It was all a lie. It's the reality that I wanted to be true, but it wasn't true for me at all. But I had this feeling that I had to be the light on the hill. I had to be the example of the ideal family. Heavenly Father wanted me to let my light so shine that everybody out there may see his good works and join the Mormon church and get married and have babies and use essential oils and drink more green smoothies and make sourdough bread. I wanted women to quit their jobs and come home. I wanted couples to have babies. And I very much felt like I was influencing people to do so by showing my family. And then I remember one day, like this is the first time that my cognitive dissonance started to crumble. And I saw what I was doing for really the first time ever. And here's what was going on. I had been writing a blog and then a radio show that week that was going to go with it about green smoothies. And I had all these different green smoothie recipes and some of the things that you could put into it. It was all about sneak nutrition, and it's so difficult to get your kids to eat greens, but stick some spinach and kale in a smoothie with some bananas and strawberries, and there you go. So I had been demoing all of these green smoothie recipes. I had written the blog about the green smoothies. And in this little blog post on our Healthy Homesteading website, I had specifically talked about fast food and how that green smoothies are my fast food. Put a little bit of almond butter and some tofu in there. You have your complete protein. You don't have to take your kids through the drive-thru. But here's the ironic part of it. While I was writing that blog, before I was done and got it edited and posted, me and a couple of girlfriends were going to meet at the McDonald's, so that the kids could play on the slides. And I went to McDonald's and grabbed all the kids' Happy Meals. And I was sitting there eating fries with my green smoothie. I was taking photos of the green smoothie with the little cardboard background that I had with my laptop, editing so that I could get that blog posted while the kids were playing. And it smacked me in the face, the absolute irony. I was a liar, an absolute fake. I'm writing this article about this is my fast food while literally dipping my fries into my peanut butter, spinach, kale, whatever it was, green smoothie. Man, it's funny too how like intuitively I knew that what I was doing was unhealthy. But I had this thought that like if people just saw me at McDonald's like everybody else, then why would they watch me? Why would they buy my stuff? If I was just selling them their own life, then nobody would need me. I had to be special. I had to be different. I had to set the ideal. But as I had this internal wrestle in my mind, I decided to do something kind of interesting. I took a photo of the fries and the green smoothie side by side. And that was my Facebook post that night. And I was going to put up this blog post about how you avoid fast food, but whatever. The reality of my life is I am dipping these fries into this delicious spinach peanut butter smoothie because life happens. Because sometimes fast food has the word fast right in it. You got to go through the damn drive-thru. And that cold, snowy day, I needed to take my kids to play in those slides so that they could get out of the house. Anyway, eventually my Mormon homesteading influencing life ended in ways very similar to how Ruby Frankie ended and so many other people end. It blew up. My family had to have a domestic violence intervention. They gave my abusive piece of crap monster of a husband 24 hours to get me out of that little farmhouse in South Carolina to a place of safety. They gave me different options, and he drove me across the country. It took a couple days to get there to Utah, where I moved into my sister's basement to save my life. And all the while, none of my followers, nobody had any idea that any of that was going on behind the scenes. Then eventually, that 24 years of Mormon Tradwife life would come to a screeching and unexpected halt when my husband abandoned me and our kids. Within just a couple of days of our marriage ending, I would have zero money. He took everything out of the bank. I never got it back. The judge didn't give it to me. We had nothing. We were renting. We didn't own a home. There were no assets to divide. The only things that we had were some Rubbermaid boxes in a garage full of sleeping bags, and I have a couple pieces of furniture. I got nothing. I had zero. Not only that, but I assumed some debt from the divorce. So I was $10,000 upside down. I hadn't worked since I was a 19-year-old girl, except for my social media stuff, which was also collapsing. I hadn't worked since I was a 19-year-old girl. I do other videos about my financials, so I'm not going to dig too deep here into how I ended up 10 months later living in my little SUV that I couldn't afford to put gas in. So I did a little GoFund and would text that to friends. I need gas money. I need to buy some food. During that time that my life was unraveling, I became so angry for one reason. I looked back on everything that I had been sold about this Mormon Tradwife life and realized that it was the single most dangerous thing that a girl can ever engage in. Ever. I had bought into it hook, line, and sinker, and it destroyed my children's lives. It destroyed my life. My life is still being impacted by it today. My health, my finances, so many circumstances in my life still aren't better because of what happened back there. And then I realized, and I've been selling this to other people. I felt so much regret, but that regret led me to a place of authenticity that I had never even known existed. My whole entire life in the Mormon church, I had been one giant catfish for Mormon Incorporated. Performance femininity to me is one of the most toxic things that we engage in as an American society, and especially religious, like the MAGA girls, the evangelicals, the Mormon girlies. We're involved in this level of performance femininity that is absolutely unprecedented. And I will use the word deadly because it is. The biggest risk of death for a pregnant woman is intimate partner homicide. 1 in 2.3 women is the new statistic that will experience domestic violence. And people like me are out there posting content like, do this. This is the best idea in the world. It's interesting how much we trust things on our tiny screens. When you see like a movie or Netflix, then you realize that those are actors, but there's something so intimate about our phones that makes it feel like it's so organic, so real. How could that possibly be fake? Despite all of the filters and the sets and the production crews and the sponsorships and collaborations and all of the money that goes into people like Ballerinafarm and Nora Smith and S.D. Williams, despite all that, we think that if we can peek into somebody's life on our phone, it must be real. So if I'm watching Hannah Neeleman bake sourdough bread and make some homemade mozzarella in her kitchen, that must be just a peek into her natural organic life. That can't possibly be staged, not in her own kitchen at home. And there's a reason why this form of marketing is so effective, because it seems attainable. When I watched Martha Stewart, I did do a lot of the stuff that she told me to do. Martha, I have such a love-hate relationship with you. You're amazing, but you also like ruined my 20s and 30s because I was a Mormon Tradwife and I was trying to be the Martha Stewart version of that. I put Martha Stewart, Kim Kardashian, Marilyn Monroe, all those people, they're up here with Heidi Klum. I can't attain that. When I see little Hannah Neeleman in her kitchen, I can attain that. And I look so happy that I find myself thinking to myself, how can I get that? And then we start to change behaviors and we start to buy. Lucky Blissfifth and Daniel Neeleman, they make men think that if they work harder in their jobs, they'll earn just that little bit more money so that they can provide their wife and their kids with the perfect lifestyle of her dream. It seems so very attainable to be able to look that good in your Calvin Klein jeans, which Lucky Blissfifth absolutely nails. I stand by the fact that I think he is one of the sexiest men in the world next to Kevin. And it seems very attainable to be able to manage the homestead and still work out in your farm gym every morning while juggling 8 homeschooled kids. They make that look very attainable, and they also make us women want that. I want that husband who's going to be able to buy a little piece of property in a tiny little house and put an American flag on the front porch, and all he has to do is work a little bit harder and be a little bit more supportive of me. Meanwhile, Nara and Hannah make us think that if we just spoil our men a little bit more, if we're just a little bit more loving, or maybe a little bit more glam, a little bit more in shape, again, the farm gym mornings, if we drink colostrum and organic Jersey milk, actually, Ballerinafarm is not organic. If we bounce a baby while answering our husband's every beck and call and just like keeping those home fires burning, our lives are going to be absolutely amazing. And again, we see this on our tiny screens and we think, this is attainable. I can do this. I can reach this. And that desire is what sells their brands. It keeps us moving forward, buying their stuff, watching their content, and consuming what they're putting out. I personally capitalized on that desire for a very long time. My husband and I were working my business full time. That is what we did. And I was selling a lie. Now, I'm not saying that what's going on behind Nara and Lucky and Hannah and Daniel and other people like them is completely fake, but it is enough fake that we need to not engage in it at all. And it should not be impacting our society, period, for a couple of reasons. First of all, the Mormon church is toxic. They have promoted a traditional family lifestyle that subjugates women. And I hear the stories from thousands of women in high demand religious groups like this, including my former Mormon hometown. We have interviews and public speaking engagements and podcasts and different things. And I always relate it to cigarettes. When the colonists first came to America, they thought tobacco was a health food. And honestly, the way that some of the indigenous populations used it was somewhat healthy. If you use it in a non-addictive, ritualistic way, it's not detrimental to your health the way that it is when you're smoking a pack a day. So the colonists took tobacco over to England and Europe and told everyone this is a health food. And everybody started smoking and they ended up dying of emphysema and other forms of cancer. The lifestyle that Ballerinafarm is selling, that the Mormon church is selling, that these women are pushing out there, it's like cigarettes. At the end of the day, Ballerinafarm is no different than the tobacco companies selling their stuff. Yeah, there may be the occasional 100-year-old grandpa who says, my secret to living to be 100 was 2 packs of cigarette a day and coffee, but most people end up with emphysema. Hannah Neeleman, in her pampered billionaire lifestyle, may have a really happy existence as a tradwife, but what she's pushing on society, which does in fact influence people, is deadly. It keeps women stuck in only being inside of their homes. And in my opinion, I think that women have diverted far too much time to cooking, cleaning, and changing diapers, which are all activities that men are equally capable of doing, instead of actually going out there and making a difference in the world. And we very much need women making a difference in the world. It's really interesting that as the world industrialized, men left their home-based businesses. They left their kids that were usually apprenticing in whatever business they were engaged in, whether that was farming or, millinery, textiles, whatever. But the women, they decided to just keep it home. Let's keep somebody there to watch the kids and cook the porridge. And as long as women are still stuck inside the homes, we are just slaves to the patriarchy. I want to end on the topic of the media literacy because I think it is important for us to do our due diligence and research the creators that we are watching and the creators that we are actually purchasing products from. Because there is a huge difference between buying some sourdough from Ballerinafarm, who is part of a richer than rich family. You can see that in some of my videos this week on both sides. Both the Wrights and the Neelmans are both wealthy AF. There's a real big difference between purchasing something from her and then finding another creator who's selling sourdough that is actually just producing it and putting it out there herself. I like to buy things from Sharon Alive. She's a real life mom who has 6 kids, that was a former Mormon, that struggles. There are so many creators out there that are putting forth real authentic content. I especially like to buy from people who maybe are struggling a little bit. So if there's a single mommy out there, somebody who's just recovering from a divorce, people who have health problems, those who aren't part of the upper echelons of our economic system, that's where I'm going to put my money. And I try to detach myself from our global corporate capitalistic market as much as I can. I especially do not promote brands that look like there's a woman at the front of it. Ballerinafarm is a prime example, that are actually backed by big money. Daniel Nealman was already a multi-millionaire when they started Ballerinafarm. That wasn't Hannah doing that on her own. And Daniel, of course, is backed by Daddy, who was one of the investors in everything that they've done, and who built Daniel a business down in Brazil that he worked for several years. And it's so important to understand ulterior motives, to understand bias, and to understand what we're watching on our tiny screen. As an influencer and a content creator myself who has a fairly substantial global reach, I think that this can be achieved with just two questions. Who is this person? Google searches, a little bit of research, what other blogs, what other products, what other things have they put out there before? And why are they doing this? At the end of the day, I think that there are so many healthy, wholesome, sustainable role models out there for women, for business owners, for families, that there's absolutely not a need for us to consume any type of content from people like Ballerinafarm. And if we do not stop supporting the resource hoarders at the top with the multimillionaires and the billionaires, we're all going to continue into further financial collapse. And that's not just my opinion, that's history. No society has ever survived decadence. Once we get top heavy like that and normal people aren't making money anymore. And with that, I'm going to start posting some of my Ballerinafarm and other mommy influencer content from my TikTok page, and I will be hanging out in the comments. Thanks for watching, guys.